Welcome back, my friends, to the D-Rate the Hate podcast. I am your host, Wilk Wilkinson, your blue-collar sage, calming outrage and helping to navigate a world divided by fog and those who would spread that fear, outrage, and grievance. Each week, I'm sharing stories from my path and using the power of conversation and collaboration with my many great guests. Together, we chart a course toward understanding, bridging divides, and fostering a community where wisdom prevails over discord. Friends, it really is about bettering the world one attitude at a time. We did not create the hate, but together we can derate the hate. The only good thing about a bad attitude is we have the ability as individuals to change it. For me, it starts with gratitude and personal accountability. I am so incredibly grateful that you have taken the time to join me for another powerful DTH episode. Please remember to subscribe and share the DTH podcast with your network of friends. If you would like to support the show, check out the Support Us page on the D-Rate the Hate website. With that, my friends, let's get to it. Friends, in this episode, we've got an incredibly insightful and thought-provoking discussion lined up for you. Joining me is my friend, Joel Bouchard, the brilliant mind behind the From Nowhere to Nothing podcast. Joel and I dive deep into the fascinating world of philosophy and the power of curiosity in bridging the gaps between different perspectives. In a time where our society feels more polarized than ever, we explore how respectful and curious conversations can lead to greater understanding and connection. We'll also touch on the complexities and the limitations of our own knowledge, and recognizing how our own biases can open doors to new insights. Plus, we'll discuss the profound impact of technology on our perceptions and the importance of getting involved in our local communities to try to be the change that we want to see in the world. So get ready for an engaging and inspiring conversation that's sure to ignite your curiosity and challenge your thinking. Let's get to it. Joel Bouchard, thank you for joining me on the D-Rate the Hate podcast, man. I do appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, man, I've been looking forward to this. You when you had reached out to me, Joel, I saw the name of your podcast, and that's what really intrigued me right off the bat. I mean, as soon as I saw the From Nowhere to Nothing podcast, I'm like, from nowhere to nothing. And then I kind of started looking into the fact that you're, this psychology, a PhD student, psychology major, and kind of a deep thinker, generalist, Renaissance man. I'm like, you know what? I think this makes for a good conversation, and I'm sure it will. So thank you, Joel. So let's start off, man. What was the catalyst? How did this From Nowhere to Nothing podcast start, and what's the thought process behind that to start off for us?
Sure. So, heading into college, I really didn't know much about philosophy. I knew it had something to do with guys with big beards and dusty books, that sort of thing. Right. And my first philosophy class, I found it was something much different than that, right? And what I tell people now is that philosophy is everybody's favorite topic. They just don't know it yet, right? It has just the worst PR, but really, philosophy is everything, and everybody is a philosopher to some extent, right? And so when those two things are true, then the whole world is something that you can talk about philosophically. So I found this out in college early on, and then years later, I reached out to that professor and said, hey, what do you think about doing a podcast, trying to recreate some of those conversations we had in philosophy class? And he was game, so we got together 6 years ago now, and over 170 episodes. We've each week we take usually one word, maybe two words, and we look at formative thought about it. What historically philosophers have said about a topic. We sort of debate amongst ourselves and use some contemporary sources to kind of hash out what we believe about it now. And then we look at speculative questions, based off of what philosophers have said and what we've talked about during the episode, what are the implications for us personally and for humankind as a whole?
Nice. So 6-year relationship with a former professor. where you guys are still getting along, and especially two people that are into philosophy. And I mean, I gotta imagine after that long, some of this stuff gets pretty deep. Now me personally, I've made the joke several times that I spent more time in bars than classrooms. So while I've been to college several times, never developed that kind of relationship with one of them, but probably had some of those same deep philosophical conversations with the guy next to me on a bar stool, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I know. I can tell you firsthand that some of the most philosophical conversations I've ever had were in the smoke pit in the Army. Yeah, like I didn't even smoke, but I would just sit around just to hear what guys
conversations.
Yeah, just to hear what they were talking about and kind of chip in and stuff. So yeah, and that's the whole point, right? Is that being a philosopher isn't something that you have to be a PhD student or professor to talk about. Anybody can talk about it, right? We all have thoughts on these issues, and we don't even have to agree. My resident expert and I, we don't see eye to eye on a lot of different things. But the method of philosophy is to always look at certain viewpoints and certain arguments rationally, critically, but curiously, and try to learn something new and try to figure out what the thought process behind a certain way of thinking is. So.
Yeah, and I think that's so important, and it's kind of like one of the things that you and I were talking about a little bit in the pre-show, Joel, is when we encounter somebody who has a different mindset or a different thought process or whatever than we do, instead of instantly attacking them. And this goes to so much of the work that I do with this podcast and the work that I do with the organization Braver Angels is, take the time to actually get to know somebody, find out, go in there with genuine curiosity and try to figure out how that person came to believe what they believe or came to that thought process. I mean, find out their process, you already know your process and you know how you got to believe what you got to believe, but spend the time, put in the work to actually get to know, how did this person come to believe what they believe? What process did they go through to think the way that they think? Not just think what they think, but think the way or what that process was for them. I think that's important.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's even something more important that is missing from what you said, and that's that I can tell you from a philosophical and a psychological viewpoint, right? Is that many of us are not aware of why we think what we think. And we're not aware of our own biases, and we're not aware of a lot of these other things, right? So I think, we have a sort of ingrained notion that all of our beliefs are well thought out, well rationalized. And, it kind of boils down to the illusion of explanatory depth, right? If I ask you how a telephone works, you go, I don't know how a telephone works, right? But then if you start to think about it, you go, well, wait a minute, how does a telephone work? And you start trying to pick it apart, and all of a sudden you realize, man, I really don't, right? And that's kind of all of life. And that's sort of why the podcast is called From Nowhere to Nothing. It's a quote from a philosopher, but it also exemplifies the process of the show, right? We are always, we're taking a very specific thing and we're picking it apart and we're trying to figure things out about it. And, very often by the end of the show, we go, okay, we've made some progress and we've learned some things, but we still can't say anything definitively, right? Because a lot of things that are in the realm of philosophy are things that are abstract, right? They're outside of the purview of science or other ways of empirically proving things. So when it comes down to it, you have rationality and you have your thoughts and intuitions about things. But knowledge, real knowledge is very hard to come by. And so I think that's something that people should always keep in mind when they go to defend their own beliefs or attack other people's beliefs. It's really important to consider, what am I not seeing about myself, about the other person?
No, that's absolutely. I mean, I think that's an incredibly important point, Joel. One of the things that really stands out to me, I'm pretty sure it's in. I don't know. I've gone through a lot of books in recent months, but one of my conversations that stands out a lot to me is my conversation with David Brooks, from New York Times columnist David Brooks. Many people know him, but his book, How to Know a Person, the art of seeing others deeply and being deeply seen, is he talks about, in that book, he talks about the idea that a lot of what we see, whether it be a color or a smell or this or that, it's a lot of those things. If you really break it down, and I hope I'm not really butchering this concept, but those things are not necessarily real in the sense that, I don't know how to say this. Now I'm really butchering it because I've kind of forgot my train of thought.
Yeah, no.
It's built upon what our brain perceives it to be, not actually what it is. And I think a lot of times that can be said for whether it be an idea or a person, a person's point of view. You talked about other people, maybe they have this idea that we perceive as wacky because it is because of our own life experience, because of what we've experienced, because of what we know or what we think we know, makes that idea seem completely out there. It's complete insanity to us based on our life experience and based on what we think we know. But to them, something other than what they believe may be completely wacky based on their life experience.
Yeah. And, there's plenty of examples from psychology that demonstrate that really well. Vision is the one that's easiest for everybody to sort of understand. But so you got 3 cone receptors in your eyes, red, green, and blue. And then there's about 25 to 50% of women have a 4th one that allows them to see millions more colors than the rest of us, right?
Wow.
So our perception of reality is much different than theirs. But then on top of that, nobody has a yellow cone receptor. And so all of the yellow you see in the world, that's just your brain making stuff up, saying, okay, we're receiving light between this frequency and this frequency. We'll say it looks like this, right? But then on top of that, color in itself is not, there's some debate philosophically, but by and large, it's pretty well established that color itself doesn't actually exist. It's just a perceptual phenomenon that humans ascribe to certain things that reflect color within a certain frequency band, but it doesn't exist in nature, right? So that's really highlights what you're just saying, right? All of your whole conception of reality is based on your perception of it, right? And there's a really important thing to point out here, right? And that's something that just complicates it and makes it really messy, but this is the way life is, right? There is a reality out there, right? And so when everybody looks at something, it's not like everybody sees something totally different, right? We all see something that is similar, but at the same time, we all see that thing a little bit differently. And trying to come to knowledge about the thing, that's been a struggle in philosophy from the beginning, right? You've had those people that have said, no, there's nothing out there, right? Like everything that exists is inside my brain. We call them sophists. And there's plenty of experiments that you can conduct to prove them wrong. But on the other end, you have, empiricists, empirical reductionists, which is essentially the viewpoint of science. And, it's the best tool for coming to know things about reality, but there's still questions it can't answer, right? How does the physical stuff of the electrochemical system of the brain cause mental stuff, our thoughts, right? Consciousness, what I'm thinking about as we're having this conversation, right? What exists outside the universe, right? Before the Big Bang, if anything, right? So science is great. Science is fantastic, but it can't answer all questions, right? So reality is a messy thing. There's real stuff out there, but everybody perceives it differently. And so trying to come to knowledge about it requires us to engage in a difficult process of really probing, right? You can't just come to knowledge simply. If you come to knowledge simply, what that means is you're just adopting somebody else's viewpoint without critically examining it.
You're just mailing it in. That, I mean, and that makes me think of another friend of mine, Jonathan Rausch's book, The Constitution of Knowledge, right? What is truth? How did we come to truth? The truth epistemology and stuff like that. And he gets way deep into that, and that kind of talks a little bit about what you're saying. But for people, people like me, I'm just like a working class guy that loves to have conversations with people. But I think what where we both find ourselves on the same plane, on the same level, Joel, is the idea that everybody has these perceptions. Everybody comes to what they believe to be their truth, and in so many different cases, especially nowadays. I mean, when we have polarization is at this toxic level in our country, and you've got class warfare, and you've got race warfare, and you've got political ideologies that are constantly battling, and one of the things that I've been spending a lot of my time working in, and one of the questions that I keep on going back to in the let's say the polarization space when it comes to our pandemic response, the government's response to the pandemic, and the people's reaction to the government's response to the pandemic, and things like that is how two different people, with great say educational pedigrees, right? Two intellectual elites of different mindsets can look at the same data, can look at the same knowledge, or so-called knowledge, and come to different conclusions. Some things are truth and some things are not. And we as a human race have to work together with those people that we disagree with, and do it if we want to get by and continue on in this beautiful experiment called humanity. We have to figure out a way to peacefully coexist with those people who we disagree with. Whether we look at the same data and come to different conclusions or not, I think it all boils down to the way that we see the common humanity in each of us, and understand that what you see as truth, and what you see as knowledge, and what I see as truth, and what I see as knowledge, it's not all relative. There are certain things that we have to be able to at least look at and say, okay, there's something here. But that all starts with that curiosity. It all starts with a certain amount of curiosity and a willingness to step outside your comfort zone and have a conversation with somebody that you just vehemently disagree with, or your reality is somehow different than their reality, and how do we get past that?
Yeah, I think what it boils down to is, at the base level, is respect, right? And I think that the reason it's eroded is to some degree due to the greater amount of technological interactions we have, right? I think we all know people, right, who would say things in a chat forum or on social media that they wouldn't say to somebody in real life, right? Oh, and sure. There's various views on why that would be, right? Some people might call them a coward or whatever. But I think that some of it, right, is that when you're interacting with somebody in a medium like that, they're not a human to you, right? I think psychologically, you just don't understand who you're dealing with, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that when you take a person and you make them two-dimensional like that, you strip their beliefs and their what they're trying to say of any contextual elements. All it is just what they've said. It does a little bit of disservice to the very context that brought those beliefs up, right? What is their specific situation, right? What is their background? What is their knowledge about different topics? And I think that regardless of who you are, right, it always is going to benefit you. It's always going to benefit you and your knowledge of a topic to learn about those contextualizing elements, to gain a broader insight and to see all the different facets of whatever it is you're looking at. There's the old example, right? You have three blind men, and each one's touching an elephant, right? One's touching the trunk, one's touching the belly, one's touching the foot. And you ask him, what kind of animal is it, right? And the one says, oh, this is a long, slithery animal. It must be a snake, right? And then each one has a completely different idea of what it is that they're dealing with because none of them have the whole picture, right? That's the way all human knowledge is. Nobody, right, is going to have the whole picture. And, it's the hard work is determining who has a piece of the picture that's worth you integrating into your worldview and paradigm, and who's misguided, right? And there's no easy way to make that determination. You have to do the hard work of researching it and determining who your sources of authority are, right? Who you trust to have epistemic knowledge. The ontological perspectives of the people involved. It's hard, but it's the only way to begin to have an idea of what you actually know in life.
No, that's absolutely right. I mean, that is such an important point. I mean, I love that example of the three blind men and the elephant, because none of us have a complete picture. I mean, one of the things that I continue to go back to in a lot of my talks and the way that I think about things is all of us are going through something, right? We either going into there was another podcast host that escapes me now, but he used to say we're either going into a storm, we're in the midst of a storm, or we're coming out of a storm, but none of us knows the full picture of what either one of us is dealing with, right? And so I go back to the baseline of just be kind to everybody and then enter into that conversation with curiosity. I want to go back to something you said there, Joel, earlier is there are so many people who will engage in a way with somebody online or in a chat room or somewhere in this toxic internet ecosystem that so many find themselves spending so much time in, and will say something to somebody online that they would never say to somebody's face, which is one of the primary catalysts I started this podcast, is because I saw so much toxicity, years ago doing things that I was doing. And in a lot of ways I contributed to that toxicity. And I was one that would say things that I'm not proud of today. Never, I would, just because of the person that I am, I wouldn't just rip off with the same kind of ad hominem attacks that I see a lot of other people do today, and a lot of people that have made a massive reputation doing. But when we look at so much of what we see from whether it be so-called intellectual elites in our colleges today, or some of the main figureheads in our political structure today, or within our media structure today, I see and what I find the most disappointing, Joel, is people doing exactly what you were talking about others doing. And that's trying to close that picture or close somebody's perception of others to a point where they're only getting a small piece of who that other person is. Like when you see a certain politician pointing out, this is who this person is because of one particular viewpoint that they have. Or labeling. I talk a lot about labeling and how people are labeled today, and the whole identity politics and how poisonous identity politics is, because it reduces certain people to one trait that they have and dehumanizes and takes away everything else about that person that makes them a unique individual. That to me is one of the most ugly things about society today is that people are so quick to remove everything else but that small patch of this person that they can lay their hand on when they've got no visual on anything else about that person.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's really, I mean, it's a type of hate speech, really, if you think about it. And even if you're somebody who thinks that you're being virtuous, right? If you think that you're condemning somebody for something that you perceive as being indisputably wrong, like we mentioned, you're still only looking at one aspect of the person, right? Mm-hmm. And yeah, this is something that is certainly a sort of a scourge on the country at this point. And again, it's contextualizing factors, right? One mistake that gets made is assuming that anybody who's an intellectual is authoritative on a wide variety of topics, right? When actually what you see is some of the people who are wholeheartedly endorsing something and sort of pushing their scientific credentials behind it, they might have a PhD in an entirely different field, right? And so a PhD is a very specific degree, right? That's the whole point. Like if you're specializing in something. So if you're not talking about your specific thing, really, it doesn't give you credibility to talk about it unless you've thought about it deeply, on your own. But and politicians, the same thing, right? We think about these people who are in very public positions. And I think that the question we should ask ourselves, right, is how did they get to these public positions? And what is their motivation for being in the public position, right? Because once you start to connect some of those dots, it might open up reasons for why they're acting and espousing things that they do. And the unfortunate fact of the matter is that the opinions and beliefs of those people at the top who have very different motivations from the people at the bottom trickle down. I know that I put up with that in the last election, right? I'm a registered independent. And, people always ask me, well, did you vote for this person or that person? Or, well, okay, so you're throwing away your vote, right? Or so what do you believe then? Well, I believe issue to issue, right? I'm gonna look at things issue to issue and decide what I believe about it, right? And I'm not going to pretend that there aren't disadvantages to being an independent in the political system. But this notion that you're throwing away a vote, or if you don't vote for one party, then you're automatically for the other party, right? Again, that brings in big philosophical questions, right, about right and wrong and truth and identity and all kinds of stuff. But yeah, ultimately, it's polarization that is the result of largely people at the bottom wholesale accepting the arguments of people at the top who have much of different motivations and contextual factors and biases and reasons for doing what they do than what we do, right? If you look at your life on a local level, right? You and I are old enough. We remember life before the internet, right? And before the internet, your world was very small. I remember, being a kid, being a teenager, and unless there was nothing more exciting than the news on TV, I never knew what was going on in the outside world, right? My neighbors and my friends and my family, that was my world, right? And you didn't care what those people's political party was. You didn't care about any of that stuff, right? You just cared about doing what right by people. Yep. That's not to say that we should shut our eyes to what's happening around the world today. But what it is saying is that we should take a step back and realize that what is happening around the world today and what's being said about people around the world, those people are the same people as your neighbors and your friends and your relatives, right? You might not know them, but somebody knows them, and somebody knows them. Yeah, they're good people. So, and that's just the contextualizing element, right? Making people that you don't know three-dimensional, understanding that they're human beings and that they're complicated and that they have beliefs that are wrong and they have biases, but they are also going to be right about stuff, and they're going to see some things that you don't have insight into. And that's going to be important for you in order to determine what you actually know.
No, that's absolutely right. I just, something that you brought up there, just, it reminded me of my own childhood. I grew up in the Midwest, grew up very poor. Most of the time we didn't have a phone. Not only did I grow up without internet, most of the time we didn't have a phone. A lot of times we didn't have a television. If we did have a television, we didn't have cable. So it was the, standard three channels. The outside world really stopped at the edge of town or as far as I could get to, so it's funny to think about how technology has expanded what we know and what people and that's another thing that I've read a lot about lately is the fact that there is just so much information now, way too much information coming at us as human beings to even begin to be able to absorb it all and have a true and educated or knowledgeable opinion on most things. So we do have to lean on some of these figures that may try to make us believe they have our best interest in mind and in our heart. But one of the things that I go back to, and that's one of the things why I just encourage people to have as many conversations with as many people. Get out there, talk to your neighbor, get out there and have as many conversations with strangers, and just be kind to everybody, kind and curious, and enter into as many conversations as possible. Is because a lot of these folks and no offense, because I understand that you're a local government official, right? But when I say this, I certainly don't mean all government officials, but often those that represent us are not the best of us, and I think that's unfortunate. But I think that the way that we get away from that is kind of working back towards our roots and our human roots, and instead of pretending that we can absorb everything that's happening in the world, we first need to try to absorb everything that's happening in our homes and in our neighborhoods and maybe our town or our local municipality or whatever, and become that expert of our own bubble, and then work our way outward instead of trying to pretend that we can absorb the whole world and make that our bubble, because it's not really our bubble. We need to kind of work backwards in humanity and get back to that local level and get back to those interpersonal conversations. Going back to what I was saying, and I'm certainly not encouraging that everybody spend as much time in bars as I did, but I had a lot of conversations, Joel, on bar stools with people all over the country and different parts of the world, and it was absolutely beautiful. And I think it's absolutely important. It's imperative we get back to that idea of, like you said at the beginning of our conversation, we're all philosophers. Most of us just don't know it, right? How do we get there? How do we figure out what our reality is? It's from interpersonal relationships, interpersonal curious conversations with the person sitting on that chair next to us, and not trying to absorb all the knowledge in the whole wide world all at once.
Yeah, I'd encourage anybody, if you live in a small town, right, get involved with your local municipality, because what you'll find out is that this idea you have of politics, of Republicans hating Democrats and all that, none of that exists at a local level, right? You go in and everybody's a volunteer, right? Nobody's getting paid. So at that level, it sort of is the best of you, right? You have people who are giving up their time because they want to make a positive change in the community. And that's what politics should be, right? And and so get involved, right? If you think that the world is so bad, we'll step up and try to change it, right? And what you'll find along the way is exactly what you're saying, is that these people, right, this mysterious other that you never come into contact with other than in your Google News feed or in a chat forum, they're all good people, right? I don't have any enemies, it's just because all it takes is just a little bit of understanding, right? And just a little bit of listening and being curious, and you'll find that the world's a lot better off than you think it is. But what we need is more people to actively get involved rather than just sitting at home being scared, right? And
That's
the
right.
advancement of technology is, we've talked about the negative part of it, right? How people would never say in person what they'd say in a chat forum. But the flip side of that is us here, right? Because I was also poor and rural. And so we look at the two of us, 30 years ago, our worlds would have never crossed. But today we can be here and we can have a positive conversation, hopefully make a positive impact on a bunch of people. And, and through the miracle of technology. So
that's right.
It's a tool, right? And that was sort of, when you asked me to be on the show, what you wanted me to, my episode title, and I don't know if we've really gotten to it, but I was talking about making yourself, right? And that's what it is. I think that a lot of people today, they feel sort of pigeonholed or sort of like they're being led like cattle down a certain way, and it's dark and the world is just a terrible place and there's nothing that anybody can do about it. And that's false, right? And especially at the local level, the one that's most impactful to you, the one that you have access to, anybody can get involved, anybody can make a difference, and anybody can brighten their own day and other people's day by getting involved. And if everybody did that, then at the big level, things would get better, right? So, you have, it's a cliche, but you have to be the change that you want to see in the world.
Be the change that you want to see in the world, man. I say it all the time. One of my favorite quotes. I'm still pretty sure it came from Gandhi originally, but yeah, be the change that you want to see in the world. Get involved in your local community. Get out there in the driveway, drink cold beers with your neighbor, and chat about how you can get from nowhere to nothing, right?
Yeah.
All right, Joel, tell me, we've kind of reached the end of our time today. Tell the DTH listeners where they can find out more about you, find your show, and if you got any kind of call to action, let us know.
Yeah, no, I'm not a marketer, so I'm not out to sell anything. But if you enjoy the conversation, you can listen to the podcast from Nowhere to Nothing anywhere you listen to MP3s. If you're interested in my music, you can Google my name. You'll find my music anywhere you listen. And that's pretty much it.
Very cool. Joel Bouchard, thank you so much for joining me on the D-Rate the Hate podcast, man. It's been an incredible conversation, and I look forward to more in the future. Take care, my friend.
Yeah, thanks.
Friends, if there's anything in this episode that provided exceptional value to you, please make sure to hit that share button. Share it with your friends, share it far and wide. And of course, if you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe right from our website so you can get the D-Rate the Hate podcast sent to your email inbox every week. So this is Wilk wrapping up for the week saying get out there, be kind to one another, be grateful for everything that you've got, and remember it's up to you to make each and every day the day that you want it to be. If there is something that you would like to share with me, you can catch me on most social media platforms, or you can email me directly, wilk@wilksworld.com. With that, my friends, I am going to back on out of here, and we will catch you next week. Take care.